I think that a lot of times people don't ask for their needs, men and women, because they are afraid to be rejected.
Sometimes there's feelings of like tension in the throat and maybe, heaviness in the chest. I dig further and, get curious about what this sensation means to them.
I think your body lets you know that you matter a lot.
Oh. It does.
I think a lot of women have an expectation of what the perfect guy would be doing or should be doing. When that expectation is held and there's no communication. What's up, guys? Welcome to the No Nonsense Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Azimah Azmi Uresk, who also happens to be my wife, will be joining us on the podcast today. She's actually going to be, we're going to be doing regular episodes together. And before we get into what that's going to look like, I'm going to let Azimah introduce herself and tell everybody what she does and what she cares about in the world and kind of, just give us a little information on yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Azimah Azmi, and I help women embody their feminine power through a blend of emotional intelligence coaching, relationship guidance, mindful movement, and also specialized internal pelvic care. So a little bit of a mind, body, spirit approach to holistic well-being and also self-discovery and personal growth. And super passionate about it because I really believe that feminine, there's so many gifts and powers behind it. And it's truly is fulfilling to live in alignment with that and watch that ripple out into their lives, communities, etc.
Okay, cool. So just to, because you just said a lot and you do a lot of different things, and I understand pretty well what it is you do, but real briefly, we'll start with each one so people can kind of just get an idea of what each one is. So emotional intelligence, I think most people have an idea of what emotional intelligence is, right? So really getting people to understand their internal emotional environment. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I believe so. Just understanding and also developing sovereignty, right, and autonomy over their emotional states, and also how that shows up in many different areas of our lives, right? It said that, I forget the research and who it was, but 95% of your decision-making process comes from emotions.
Yeah.
Right. And this often happens unconsciously. So I think it's super, super important to get underneath and make the subconscious conscious so that we have a better grip on the decisions that we make and have a better understanding of what goes behind those decision-making process, especially when it comes to wanting to make changes and shifts in our lives for the better, or in a way that is more nourishing or fulfilling for ourselves, and you and I have been through some coda work where we know that this is true in so many areas, so many levels as well, right? And that realization that what I really do have control and ownership over is how I show up. How I show up for myself, and also how that ripples out into other people.
Right. Yeah. So I think a great example is I may come into the house in a certain mood. Okay. Now, if you're unconscious, right, and you haven't done much work on this yet, my mood affects you in a certain way where you're like, oh no, he's upset. What did I do wrong? That makes for a pretty anxietal life to base your mood on the mood of the person that you're living with or spending all your time with or very invested in. Yeah.
I feel like it's a very kind of porous dynamic, right? Where the emotional shifts can either make or break how the day is going to go.
Yeah.
Or and we've experienced this before too.
Yeah.
Relationships, right? Oftentimes it comes from a place of what can I do to get my partner to do XYZ, or what can I do to communicate XYZ to my partner, or so that he can show up for me in this and this ways. And I always tell them there's nothing I can do to make them do something, but what I can support you with is to guide you into your own emotions and what you bring into the relationship that creates what you're currently seeing in relationships, right? In your relationship and how you guys communicate to each other. And so oftentimes, we get into certain stories of certain things that tend to come up, certain patterns, recurring patterns that come up. And instead of giving them what to do, I get them to check in with themselves and how they're feeling in their bodies. And it's funny because sometimes I experience women who don't want to go into what they're experiencing within their bodies, their sensations, because it can be quite uncomfortable. And how I noticed this is they start like looking up, looking at all the they go into a lot of like mind stories
They start
and do all
thinking.
these like
Yeah.
explanations and this and that and this and that. But I always have to bring that back down. Okay, well, but what are you feeling right now? What is the sensation in your body right now? Right. And when I'm able to like reel it back in from the endless mind chatter, sometimes there's feelings of like tension in the throat and maybe, heaviness in the chest. And I dig further and, get curious about what this sensation means to them, right? I may have some ideas, but it's important for me to also get into how they experience it, what it means to them, because it's oftentimes it's the meanings that we attach to these sensations that has us either deepening into it or avoiding it.
Right. So if I'm understanding you correctly, a lot of times they come to you focused on what their partner is doing and how to get their partner to do a certain thing so that they can experience a certain thing.
Yeah.
When they're actually shut off from their own experience to begin with, right? So they're whatever it is that they want to experience internally, they're placing that responsibility outwards onto their partner a lot of times. Is that accurate? Okay. And so obviously we do very similar work, right? And so I think I think most people walk around in the mindset, I know I did for a long time until I got awake to this, that like, if the rest of the world would just line up exactly the way that I want it, then I'll be okay, right? Then I'll feel the way that I want to feel. So no ownership over how they actually are responding to the world, and just placing full responsibility on everything around them, all the circumstances. And if that just stays in place, then everything will be fine. And I tend to see that not work very well.
Yeah, there's this victim consciousness, right? This victim consciousness, I know that word can be triggering to some people, but let's call it for what it is, right? Standing in the place of powerlessness or, standing in the place of my well-being or happiness or peace or serenity is entirely dependent on people and all these other circumstances. And that's not really a fucking fun place to live in. That powerlessness and helplessness, it's not fun. And also it's pretty exhausting to constantly be swayed by and swirled around by all these different circumstances that I really have no control over.
Right.
And you and I have been through some coda work where we know that this is true in so many areas, so many levels as well, right? And that realization that what I really do have control and ownership over is how I show up, how I show up for myself, and also how that ripples out into other people.
Right. Yeah. So, like, I think a great example is I may come into the house in a certain mood. Okay. Now, if you're unconscious, right, and you haven't done much work on this yet, my mood affects you in a certain way where you're like, oh no, he's upset. What did I do wrong? How do I fix his mood so that I can be okay? I'm knowing about your work. That's a situation that happens. It happens with men too all the time, right? Oh, my woman's upset. How do I fix it so that she's not upset so that I can feel at ease, right? And so they're placing their internal experience is fully based on the experience that their partner's having at the time. And that makes for a pretty anxietal life to base your mood on the mood of the person that you're living with or spending all your time with or very invested in. Yeah.
I feel like it's a very like kind of porous
Yeah.
dynamic, right? Where the emotional shifts can either make or break like how the day is gonna go.
Yeah.
Or like And we've experienced this
Yeah.
before too.
Yeah. Yeah. I know like numerous times, like catching ourselves coming into like some tension, right? And over some really small things, right? And just, and yeah, there's probably some background stuff that's making the small things bigger, but I feel the tension and I feel like, oh man, am I really willing to ride the momentum of this throughout the day because I want to be right? And I'm upset that she's upset about something that I feel is small, right? And when that happens, like, I feel like it's really important for me. I'm like, all right, I got to stop for a moment and first just convey, listen, I don't want to get into an actual like fight about this. We can have a disagreement and we can have some challenging feelings. Let's deal with those. But what I don't want to do is be fighting each other about this.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't want to ride that momentum for the rest of the day and just have this uneasiness. Like, let's be here with each other and really like what's active in you, what's active in me right now. Why do I feel so threatened that I want to defend myself? Why do you feel so threatened that you want to defend yourself? Right? And it's like, that to me is ownership, right? I gotta own. I could ride this out and be like, fucking crazy bitch, like fuck her, right? And just go through the rest of the day like that.
Right.
And I'm like, but no, dude, I like, time is so valuable, you know, like. And
How does it feel when you ride that wave of fucking crazy bitch?
it just doesn't feel good because I'm fighting. I'm in a state of resistance for the rest of the day when I do that, right? And I think what it requires, it's not about just getting you to shut up, right? Because dude, that's a lot of dude strategy, and I get it. Just get this bitch to shut up, and then my day will be peaceful, right? It's not about that. It's about, I've got to take ownership for the fact that you and I can have different experiences over the same thing, and neither of us is wrong. And that is really hard to understand, right? You may despise this color orange. I may think it's fantastic, right? Neither of us is wrong, right? It's a personal preference. It's an experience that each of us have when we see this color, right? What comes up for us when we see this color? What comes up for you when you experience a certain thing may be very different than what comes up for me based off our life experiences, right? Our culture, all the things that we have that go into our personal filter. And it's like, man, I got to take that into account. And it can be really challenging too.
Yeah.
It can be really challenging too. If I'm on autopilot and I'm not conscious, right, and I'm not present, very, very easy to just make you wrong.
Sure.
So easy to make you wrong.
Yeah. And it takes me out of presence, right? When I'm in my own thought loops. And I think where the friction comes is that lack of clarity, right?
Yeah.
That lack of clarity and awareness to like what is going on right now. And also what it is that I want out of, let's say, my day or whatever event that we're going into, what is it that I want to create, and also getting to know what my partner wants out of it as well, out of the day, out of the event, out of the situation.
Yeah.
And then neither of it is wrong. We just get to like see each other for what is.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is like taking the time to pause and like tap in with each other. Like, and I think this is great. And it's really effective when we do this. It's like, you know, we have visions for our year. We have visions for our lives where we want to take things, but it's like, man, how do we want to experience that day? Some days I might just need to be alone. Like today I need my own space because I got stuff to do. Today I want to spend time with you and building towards this. And it's like, and finding a way to make this a win-win for both of us. Yeah. And sometimes, it could be checking in before we go to the gym. It could be checking in before we go to a social thing. Like, hey, like, you know, just making sure and seeing where we're both at, as opposed to not paying attention to any of this, just assuming or just blindly focused on God knows what, right? Not present at all, thinking about all the other things that are going on instead of, hey, I'm here, I'm with this person, like, let's check in with each other. And I think that's like, Robin, you know, one of our mentors, she used to say this all the time, you know, you got to inspect what you expect.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I just have an expectation, like, oh, we're going to this party, you better just be fun and fucking not be a pain in the ass and like make my friends laugh and stuff like that. Like, okay, I mean, cool. That could be what I want. Right. But I got to check in with you and see where you're at. Maybe you're not having a great day. Maybe you just started your cycle. Maybe, you know, there could be a bunch of different things going on, right? Yeah. Let me check in with you and see what your capabilities are before I just walk in with this expectation.
Yeah.
Right.
Or capacity.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. What do you have room for? Exactly. I think that's like, can you explain I think this is helpful to men and women, but why understanding your partner's capacity in a given moment is so important?
I'm gonna use the example of in fitness training. Let's say when someone gets injured, right? Because I've been a personal trainer for over 10 years and growing up, like I love this field, but I see lots of similarities in like training to this work as well. So injuries usually happen when the load exceeds capacity.
Okay.
Period. Right? Whether it is, I haven't developed the capacity to lift a 200 kilo deadlift, and then I hurt my back, and it takes me out for a while.
Okay.
Right?
So to dumb that down, just because some people are maybe like me, I tried to do more than I'm capable of.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. For whatever reason.
Right.
And the same thing exists within relationship. If I'm putting on you all these things that I expect of you, right? Like go do XYZ things, and then also be really nice and gentle to me when you talk to me. And also I want you to make sure that you get all the dishes done exactly in the way that I like it. There must not be any grease on the bowls. But then also what you actually have capacity for is not that. You just want to get home after work and chill out and play a video game to take your mind off of the craziness that happened at work, right? Maybe, let's say, percentage wise, I wanted you at your 90%, but really you came home with 20%, right? And so when I have that expectation of you got to show up for me in that 95%, but really you only got to 20%, that's where that expectation becomes that resentment under construction.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It just doesn't line up because I'm going off of what I want and not really checking in with what is available.
Yeah. And I think I know for men this happens. I'm sure for women it happens too, but I know for men, and you and I have talked about this, I think a lot of women have an expectation of what the perfect guy would be doing or should be doing, right? And when that expectation is held and there's no communication, man, it can be really deflating to not be living up to this perfect guy all the time, right? And so we're not checking in with each other about what our capacity is. I'm being held to a 95 or better standard of how I need to be showing up on a regular basis. And I think a lot of guys just end up getting deflated because a lot of times they're not even in touch with how to show up in the ways because there's no communication going on. There's these unspoken expectations and passive aggressiveness or blow ups, right? And no real actual communication going on. And some guys just get completely withdrawn after a while. And then the woman loses faith in the guy because he's given up. I can't make her happy no matter what I do. What's the point? He becomes withdrawn, right? Intimacy starts to fade because neither of them feel good about where the relationship's at. Yeah. And all of this could be remedied with just communicating to each other, right?
Yeah,
and
clear communication.
Yeah.
And what I find often in working with women is realizing there's a inherent fear of just plainly asking for what they want.
Yeah.
So ask for it.
Yes.
You want some flowers? Ask for it.
Yeah.
You want, this and this done at this and this time. Like, did you ask for it?
Yeah.
Sometimes, no, I don't want to be a burden. No, I don't want to put too much on. No, I don't want to be too much. That's a story that keeps them from asking these questions. But then at the same time, that creates all this friction because then, the price that they pay is that they're not seen for what it is that they actually desire.
Yeah. 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 I think there's sometimes there's a conflation between thoughtfulness, right? And communicating what you want, right? So I think it's absolutely wonderful. And I think guys should, and I use that word carefully because I hate the word should, but I think it's a good idea. I think women enjoy it when we are thoughtful and we anticipate their needs ahead of time and are thinking ahead of time. But we can't do that all the time for all things, right? So it's great when we have the space, because if I'm thinking about you ahead of time, that means I got a lot of space internally. Like I've got my shit handled if I can think about you ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that signifies to you that I've got my shit so handled that I had the space to think about you, which I love doing that. When
Yeah.
I can make the space to really anticipate your needs and do something nice that you didn't expect, fantastic. If you expect that from me 100% of the time, I can't live up to that, right? And that's unfair, right? And so I just say that as a sort of context, right? So the context is really important, and that making that distinction. That's different than if I don't anticipate all your needs, right? You might have to communicate them to me to help me out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes when you're, stressed out or bogged down by work things or whatever stresses that you might be experiencing, yeah, I don't think it would be fair for me to just assume that you're gonna know things, right? Sometimes I really get to spell it out for you,
Yeah.
that this is what I need. And sometimes it might take a little bit of, it might come out a little bit messy,
Uh-huh.
but eventually it's me also hearing myself and what it is that I need
Right.
to get clear with myself before I'm like, oh, actually this is what I really wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just said something great about being messy, right? And we're both big on this.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of times people don't ask for their needs, men and women, because they are afraid to be rejected,
Yeah.
right? They're afraid that the need won't be met. And so that keeps them quiet, right? And that, or they're unwilling to be messy in the communication. Like they're thinking like, oh, if I don't know how to do this perfectly, right, we're going to end up in a blow up
Yeah. It's all
over
gonna
it.
go
And
up
they're
in flames.
unwilling to go into the blow up, right? I think in order to practice communication in an effective way, you have to be willing to go through the blow ups and then repair, right? If you are not willing to repair through the worst of it, I don't think you can have a stable, healthy relationship.
I agree with that because I don't know. I think it's inherently part of our human nature to go through those experiences of like things popping off.
Yeah.
Imagine
Imagine they had some of our early fights on camera.
Oh my god.
Oh, that'd be so embarrassing. Yeah, that would be so embarrassing, but necessary.
But necessary.
Yeah.
But necessary because we could like really experience the depth of like, whatever our frustration and rage and all these things. Because I want a partner that can hold all of that.
Yeah.
Right. And even through experiencing that, not run away and hide.
Yeah.
Like that just informs me that obviously, not to the point of it being abusive. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Abuse is, there's no room for abuse.
Yeah. Or disrespectful or things like that. But I think it's important to experience those chaotic moments just so that, okay, well, this relationship isn't going to be all rainbows and butterflies.
No,
and
absolutely.
a unicorn's farting glitter, like it's going to go through some tough shit, some really uncomfortable stuff. And I think it's like that, like trial by fire, right?
Yeah.
I want to break the patterns that I saw growing up, like when, let's say, a parent would blow up in explosive rage, the other would shut down, and this would go on for months and even like years.
Yeah.
I'd rather go through that and then we come together, express what we need to express, as long as that we're not physically or even emotionally like hurting each other, right? But we come back together and we find a solution, a path moving forward to like really see each other and meet each other from that place that all of this is okay.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's our experience, and I think in the work that we've both done with men, women, and couples, I think we've just seen this over and over again, right? It's that unwillingness to go into conflict, and that unwillingness to go into conflict with your partner is really you're missing an opportunity to connect with them deeper. You're actually missing out on intimacy. Like intimacy requires conflict. You can't know somebody fully if you can't go into conflict with them.
Yes. And I would also say to develop a healthy relationship with conflict, even within yourself, right? Or like the more uncomfortable or negative emotions within ourselves, and allow ourselves to go there. I know I've worked with lots of women who deny that they have anger.
Oh yeah,
Did
so
not.
many, right? So many. Dudes are pretty good about it for
Yeah.
the most part. There's a few I run into. Man, I've worked with so many women that deny that they have anger,
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's pouring out of you, homegirl. Like you hide it with the nice smile and the
Yeah.
giggle or the little submissive posture, but girl, you're seething with anger, and I think they have judgments about their anger.
Yeah. I can relate to it in my own experience. I've been explicitly told growing up as a bigger sister and all that I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't get mad because I'm supposed to set a good example for my younger sister.
Yeah.
So even when she was angry, I couldn't fight back and
Right.
showed up in my jujitsu, showed up in everything. But I had this internalized idea that me being angry will not get the love that I want.
Yeah.
Right. And so how that ripples out into relationship is when I'm mad at you, I don't even know that it's me being mad. I default into like crying
Right.
and crying and crying and crying instead of anger. And one of my friends told me this, that anger is your body's way of communicating that I matter,
Yeah.
so that was a really helpful perspective in that, this emotion is actually trying to support me with something, trying to support me with whatever. Like, what is it am I not communicating in a way that actually honors me?
Yeah.
And it's not to make the other wrong, but like, this is important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your body lets you know that you matter a lot.
Oh. It does. It does. Always does. It does that faster than my mind catches up. But
Yeah. So, and I remember when I didn't understand why you would shut down, why you would roll with dudes and like fuck some good dudes up, like when we're training jujitsu, we're talking about, and you would train with guys and you would do really well with guys. And it's not like they were letting you. And then you'd roll with a girl who was nowhere near as skilled with you and just kind of fawn and like roll into a ball. It was so frustrating for me as a coach because I didn't understand that it was not necessarily a choice at the time. That was like a trauma response to the dynamic you grew up with your sister. I was like, as watching you work through that was really powerful for me. It was actually a really big lesson for me, when I was working with fighters and even just people that I work with now. You can't just snap your fingers and decide not to engage in these old belief systems when they're deeply embedded in your body.
your body remembers.
Your body remembers everything. If just a resource, and I'll probably talk about this a lot, but there's a book called Body Keeps the Score. Was it Besser Vanderkolk? Is that his name? Yeah. Fantastic book, really good resource on this. Your body stores all sorts of stories, feelings, trauma, the word trauma. It's like if you're reliving a reaction from your past and that is unfavorably weighing on your decisions today, that is what trauma is, right? You letting a past event, right, unfavorably informing your decisions today, sometimes with or without your permission, sometimes with or without your knowing. It could be really frustrating, right? And that because you can see what's happening. Everybody around you sees like, you're better than that. Why are you doing that? And then you're like, I know I'm better than that. I don't know what I'm doing here. And then like, until you gain the skills and the know-how on how to deal with that stuff, it's a fucking losing battle, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happens for women sexually as well. Like, and from what you've taught me and our journeys together and learning about human sexuality and the shame that people carry that shuts them down from experiencing pleasure and women that can't experience orgasms and all that stuff. Like, I really believe this. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're more of the expert here. There is no such thing as a woman that is incapable of having an orgasm.
I would agree so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They may not let themselves unconsciously. There may be some blocks, right? But I think it's available to all of them.
I think it's possible for everybody to have all kinds of orgasms, so many layers of orgasms.
Yeah.
As well. And it just speaks into our relationship to going there, right? And like a relationship to opening and receiving in that level. So, shame is so deeply embedded into our culture as it relates to sexuality.
Right.
For a really, really long time. Even one of the most important nerves that innervates the pelvic bowl is called the pudendal nerve, and it comes from Latin for pudendum, and that means to be ashamed of or to shame.
Wow.
Yeah, and
And that's in the pubic region
Yeah, in the pelvic region.
for women or for men or for both?
Both.
Both.
Both. You guys have progenital nerves as well. But just coming from that. And there's so many other examples in various languages that allude to our genitalia or pelvic region being something to be ashamed of,
Wow.
you know? And it's so deeply embedded in our psyches, and it's passed down from generation to generation that, yeah, I think now it's time, especially now that, we're in environments that is much more safer. It's much safer to go there, right? In our families, in our homes, and also the resources that we have access to. There's so many now, like women's circles, and so many like offerings and spaces that are supporting sexual empowerment and liberation and all that. So now it's a lot more accessible, but still, we are rewiring the experiences of the women in our past,
Right.
and that we came from in our lineage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I think we've been talking about this a lot lately, but the way shame our bodies and our ability to experience pleasure and all that stuff. Yeah, there's a ton of shame. It's like a person's freedom in any capacity in their life, whether it's in their relationship, personally, sexually. What are you not willing to look at? Right? Where are you not willing to go? Because that's the limitation of your freedom, right? So if there's a thing in our relationship and we're just not willing to go there, that's as far as that relationship's going. If there's something in my body that I'm afraid to look at or my past, that's as far as I'm going to be able to go with it. And that unwillingness to go there is really what keeps people trapped. I think to be compassionate too, sometimes it's not just an unwillingness to go there, but it's an unwillingness to know what to do when you go there. And that's why we have both found it, I think, really important to seek out guidance over our lives. Like, obviously, it's what we do for a living, but we had to go out and seek training. I think it's what we do for a living because of the way that we suffered so greatly. Like, I feel comfortable speaking for both of us in this capacity, but I know that our suffering has led to our search, right, for just deeper understanding over the things that were ailing us, the things that were really causing us pain. And as we found freedom and both found that we had a gift to guide people in the way that we had been guided, it sort of set forth a life path for us, right? And so my point of all saying that is, if you don't know what to do, if you know where you want to go, or you don't know how to have the capacity to go there or what to do with it, I think it's really important to seek guidance. I don't think it's a solo venture most of the time. In fact, I may say this a million times in the course of this podcast, right? But we get wounded in our early relationships and we heal in our relationships when it's time to heal. Like, it's not a solo venture.
No. Our deepest wounds hold like the greatest like gifts for our own like liberation. Right? And a lot of times, like post COVID and everything, it can be easy to slip into this idea that we're isolated and not connected to the rest of the world, when that is not true. Right? Anytime when I was like early in my recovery journey and I didn't really have community, I sought community online by sharing my story.
Right.
When I started sharing my story, sure, there were people who were like, why are you talking about this? And then there were the other people who were like, man, I really relate to what you got going on. And then we end up becoming friends. And now I have like even people that I've never met in person as like really close friends online. And that to me is what, why I do this work, is that community element to it. Like anything that I'm going through, chances are there's going to be some people out there navigating something similar.
Yeah.
Right. And if I can find certain tools that support me, what's not to say that it won't support them. And also, if I get stuck on certain things, man, would it be freaking cool for me to know a person who has been through something similar, and I can ask for guidance around that, because healing doesn't happen alone.
No,
I wish
it really don't, man. It really don't. Like if you're watching this and you're in a tough spot and there's some things that you want to work through and maybe you don't know where to get started. Maybe you've actually tried some things and they haven't worked so well. man, community is so important. I can't tell you how many people I run into that read all the self-help books. And dude, these books are great. I love these books. They give me insights and ways to look at things that I probably would have never thought of on my own. They're extremely valuable. I make use of them. It's not a waste of time. If that is all a person does, I don't think they're going to get too far. When we're really talking about getting into the dark, murky waters of your insides, man, I don't think you can do that with books and doing that alone. I'm not even like, unless you have an exceptional therapist, I don't even think therapy, modern Western therapy, is the way through. I know some therapists that are outstanding, and I hear some horror stories about people that go to therapy, and the therapist just keeps them in the story. The therapist validates everything, right? Your feelings are all valid. Not all your stories are valid, right? And I think that's really, really important to understand. Like, and I have to understand that, like, my feelings are valid, right? Valid. How I feel about something, how I experience something, valid. All my stories are not necessarily valid. And I need somebody to kind of help push me past that. Not in a way that's making me wrong, right? But just hold up that accountability. It's like, hey, brother, I see that you feel like this and you're running off this story. Do you want to continue to run off that story? Do you want to continue to be right about your story even though it's killing you? That's a big fucking piece, man. Yeah. And no, you're not going to do that for yourself a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Most people are not going to willingly challenge their own story to that capacity. Absolutely. Some people will go very far by themselves. Man, I did so much work by myself, but it was not until I had people willing to hold up that mirror and say something very similar. Like, hey man, I see you and this is the story that you're telling me. Are you really willing to live the next 5, 10, 15 years of your life with that story in the operating system, being right about that story?
Yeah, as if like you're holding up a mirror to that story, and I'm like, and basically asking them like, is this a story or are you making this story a fact and the truth, the only possibility that can ever exist?
Right, exactly. Right. This is the only way that it's possible to look at the thing.
Yeah. And oftentimes and I experience this too with my clients, that oftentimes when you put that plainly and put that mirror up, they're like, no, I don't really want to stay in this truth forever, because that's limiting. Because it takes away any other possibility that, for example, a happy relationship can exist even through XYZ things happening. So, I think it's a really important tool to just put them in question, right? Okay, you're running with this story. This is the truth. What would life feel like in 5, 10, 15 years running with this truth?
Yeah, totally. And so like for instance, right, there could be somebody that like, my partner has to act like this in order for me to feel like he loves me. Okay, that's the story that this girl has or guy has, right?
Yeah.
And then the guy, and so they're making it a fact that if he doesn't do X, Y, Z, that he doesn't love them. And so because they hold it that way, they may not be experience a very real love that this person has for them. Because they are confined to a very limiting story of what and who this person needs to be for them, right? And I think the more and more, and it's crazy because, you know, in our home life, you and I are doing this to each other constantly. Sometimes it's really annoying, but challenging the story, not to make the person wrong, but to help them move past the limitations of a story, right? If when I met you, right, and guys, I promise we'll get into our background story in future episodes. We'll probably be doing like one a month together. But if when I met you, I held you to the story of who you were, right? The girl with a boyfriend, right? It's like, and like works in gyms and that's who you are. Or when we moved to America and you were really just having a hard time. We're newly married, COVID starts, you're fucking struggling as new in recovery and you know, immigrant into this country, had just left your family, traditional Muslim Malay family, and like breaking all these and like you're a mess, right? At the time. And I hold you as to that is the only thing that's possible for you, is for you to be a mess. I can never experience you in another way.
No.
Right? And I'll always hold you to that. And if I hold you in that story, I'm going to experience you that way, even if you're not being a mess.
It's almost like there's like filters on.
The filter's on, and that's how I experience you, right?
Yeah.
There's a thing called the reticular activating system in the brain, okay? it will constantly seek evidence for what it is that it believes. Okay. So you'll often hear stories about, man, I don't see a whole lot of blue Honda Civics until now. Once I bought a blue Honda Civic, I see them everywhere, right? You'll see them everywhere. If I asked you to start looking for the color brown in this room, you'd find the color brown, right? And you'd even be pushing some things in there that are not quite brown. It's brown enough, right?
Like,
Because you're looking for it,
brown. Yeah.
right? You're looking for evidence of what you already believe.
Yeah.
Okay. That is true for all humans all the time. Okay. So if that's true for all humans all the time, maybe it's worth taking a look at it. Maybe it's worth having people in our lives, maybe even the closest people in our life, that are going to challenge us on those belief systems when they see they are limiting. Now, as we've learned, right, there's an art to this. There's a dance in how to challenge from love, not from, I need you to be different.
And I think a really simple way of looking at it, right? Instead of focusing on the things that I don't want, I pour energy into what I do want to create. You know, if my attention is hyper focused on all the things that I don't want to experience, I don't want to have happen, I'm actually putting more energy into it. I'm putting, all my conscious energy into that, instead of like, energy flows where awareness goes, right? If all my awareness goes into the things that I don't want, that tends to create more of the things that I don't want, or my brain picks up on all the things that I don't want, because that's the point of focus of my brain.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if I decide and choose to lean into the things that I do want to create, I'll start getting creative.
Yeah, you start looking for the opportunity for that thing.
Exactly.
It's like when people set up their online dating profiles and it's everything they don't want.
Don't be,
it's like, man, you're
under
probably
6.
Yeah, I don't want you under this. You have to be the.
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus, I'm going to go ahead and make the judgment that you're probably not a lot of fun. If you're purely focused on what you don't want, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. I get it. I won't say it's such a weird way to live, even though like I find it strange, even though I once lived that way. There was a time where my entire focus is on what I don't want. I want to, I think, close with a topic that I think is really important and a big part of our personal experience, right? Explain to the listeners and viewers, like, what does it mean to actually love somebody unconditionally, right? So like when they're going through their stuff, and some of it can be really, really challenging, what does it call on in a person to be able to do that and not betray themselves at the same time?
Again, I think it comes from also allowing, for example, myself to go into the areas that I don't really like about myself, right? The parts of me that are hypercritical, the parts of me that can be obsessive over certain things if my needs aren't being met in a certain specific way, and getting to a place where, you know what, I still love and accept myself, even if I have these not so fun parts about me. Okay, and if I can hold that within myself, it becomes a lot easier to see it in my partner.
Okay.
Another person, right? And when I am insisting that he has to show up in a specific way for me to like give him all my love, and then when he shows up in a different way, I'm gonna withdraw.
Right.
Then I gotta be honest with myself and be like, no, that's transactional.
Yeah, that's just poison, right? When like, I know like in times where I've been struggling, and you've withdrawn, it's like one of the most hurtful things. And I'm sure that I've done it as well. And I think like just having that education, I think it's so important for people to understand when your partner is struggling with a thing and you're feeling threatened or compromised and you withdraw. Yeah. And usually I think people withdraw to protect themselves. Sometimes they withdraw to punish.
Yeah, it comes from, I believe it comes from an unconscious place too. It's just something that I've seen happen, like in my parents' relationship.
Right.
My mom would just like shut down. Yeah. Right. And I thought that was normal. Right. Right. It goes on unconsciously until, let's say, you call it out and be like, but my experience of you is that you withdraw when I'm going through difficult times. Yeah. And that's where I'm like, oh, that's where the awareness sets in. Yeah. And now with that awareness, how can I ignore it when it happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. And withdrawing, I think what withdrawing communicates, at least, especially when a person's struggling, they already don't feel good about the struggle, right? Then the partner withdraws and it's like, oh, they can't love me through this. So I can't let them see me like this, right? And now I have to withhold from you. I have to withhold from you because if I don't withhold from you, you're going to withdraw from me. You're going to take love away from me. You're going to abandon me in essence, right? And then all that early childhood shit gets kicked up and like all my beliefs about myself are reaffirmed that people can only love me up to a point.
Exactly. And understanding that is happening in real time with the other person who's
Absolutely.
doing the withdrawing too.
Yeah.
Right? You're showing up in this way because I'm unlovable.
Yeah. If he really loved me, he wouldn't show up this way.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And it's, man, it's so much, I think each person doing the work to be able to like meet all the parts of themselves that are terrified, afraid, and unworthy and all that stuff. And like be able to like be solid with themselves first before they can actually show up for their partner in the same way. And I don't think you have to be like completely healed to be in a relationship. I think you get that practice in relationship. I think the only way to get that practice is in relationship. Like when you and I met, I had done a lot of work, but we were both walking red flags.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? In so many ways, right? Yeah. Walking red flags. So, you know, there may be some red flags. That doesn't mean that it's not something that you don't commit to work through with a person.
Yeah, I think there's a willingness that needs to happen, a willingness to go there within ourselves and with the other person. And also, you know, especially within ourselves, because if we don't know, if I didn't know how it felt internally within myself, what it feels like of safety feels like, what safety feels like, how the hell am I going to know that when it comes to being in relationship with other people? Right. It's like, I think it's like a deeply somatic experience in order to start, you know, instead of reacting to things, right? Yeah. I come from a place of an ability to respond in a way that is helpful for the situation or helpful for the relationship, helpful and in alignment with our shared vision, right? That's responsibility.
Yeah. Well, you can respond because you've developed the presence to see all the things happening and they're not happening unconsciously, right? Yeah. When they're happening unconsciously, if I'm like blind and just the dynamics are happening, but I can't really put words to what they are or feel them or see them, I can't see them coming. I can't see them happening. It just happens, right?
Yeah.
It's like listening to a language that you don't understand, right? Once you start to understand the language and you start to see those sentences forming, right? It's like then you have a choice of what words to use. Exactly. But until you learn the language, you don't really have a choice of what words to use.
Just like any skill acquisition, right? Like you put in the reps, right? If getting to know your emotions or feeling your feelings isn't a skill that you've had before or have had much practice with, you gotta practice it. Yeah. And just like training, again, right? We put in the reps, we show up. Yeah. Right? Sometimes it's gonna create some soreness. Sometimes it's gonna feel really awkward as you're learning a new movement. But then over time, as you keep showing up, things get smoother. The neural pathways get smoother and clearer. Yeah. And over time, you just become more and more skilled and proficient with it.
Yeah, you know? Yeah. I think you got to show up, you got to do the reps, and you got to be willing to be scared to death for a good long time.
It's going to be a risk. Period.
Yeah. So as we come to a close, tell our viewers where they can find you, how they can reach out to you.
All right. So you can find me on Instagram. It's iam.mightylight. And I also have a website, iammightylight.com.
Cool. And they can check out your offerings. They can DM you.
Check out my offerings, DM me.
Yeah. You're available for one-on-one coaching, correct?
I'm also available for one-on-one coaching. If you're in San Diego, I host free monthly women's circles. It's called Things Your Mama Don't Want You Talking About. Yeah. And that's free at Nalu Healing Arts. So you can also register for those women's circles through my Instagram. There are links there as well.
Rad. Yeah. So thank you so much. Like I said, guys, Azimah and I, we have so much to talk about in the realm of relationship and all things like that. And so we'll probably be doing this monthly together. I hope you guys get a tremendous amount of value out of this. Thank you for coming on and just sharing so much knowledge with people. And for the work that you do with people. Like, I get to see the work that she does with people, and women and some men, through some really sticky parts of themselves, and in one of the most safe ways possible, right? And so, like I did say before, we got to be willing to be scared to death, but it really fucking helps when somebody can make it feel safe. So I'm scared, but I know I'm safe. From that place, massive change can happen. We'll have all your information on the info that we post to all the places that you're going to listen to this. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we will see you next time.